Welcome back to the Product-Led Festival. Stay seated because there's another exciting presentation about to start. Before we kick off the next batch of kick-ass content, we'd like to take a moment to thank our sponsors for helping us bring this awesome event to your screens. And don't forget, you can access even more incredible content from exclusive articles and interviews to all past and future events on demand, as well as templates and frameworks by becoming a PLA member. Head over to productledalliance.com for more info. Enjoy the next presentation. Hello everyone and welcome back. It gives me great pleasure to introduce our next speaker for the festival, Michael Yammans, who is a senior PM at Mimecast. And today Michael is going to talk to us about your own personal brand as a product manager. And we'll be taking questions at the end, so please do pop them in the chat as they come to you. And without further ado, welcome to the stage, Michael.
Hello. Thank you so much, Heather. Everybody can see and hear me okay? And then the next step is sharing out my screen. Let's see. I think we're good to go. Okay, good. Like Heather said, my name is Michael Yeomans. I'm a senior product manager at a company called Mimecast. So we're a cybersecurity company that deals mostly with email security, file security, and web security, plus data protection. And so my product areas that I focus on specifically are around legal and compliance. So I deal with a lot of products that have to do with like finding data, providing that data, also monitoring data, data migrations, and then also backup and recovery, plus some other things. I'm very excited today to talk to you about something that's near and dear to my heart because it was quite a journey for me to kind of figure out what exactly this was, and I had no idea about it in the beginning. So it's something that I've been wanting to actually do kind of like a talk for a long time, and Heather's been trying to get me to do one of these for the better part of a year. So without further ado, we're going to get right into it. You get brownie points if you're from the UK and you know where that came from in the 80s. So if you're a Doctor Who fan like myself, you may have seen the episode where the 11th Doctor brought Vincent van Gogh to the future, the present, which I think was like 2010 at the time. And he kind of, he walked him around and showed him how people were appreciating his work. And then Bill, who played the curator, he asked, hey, I know you saw me the other day. What do you think about, Vincent van Gogh and, what is he to you? And he talks about how great his work was, that he's one of the greatest painters of all time and most popular painter of all time. Also that he was, an amazing person, as tragic, as his past was. He never got to see, people actually appreciating his work, right? And so when you think about, and if you look at the examples you see on your screen, he's kind of taken back and looking like, this is what people think of me. My work throughout my entire life is showcased and, provides something that I never even thought was going to be, years and years from now. And so, that's his personal brand, right? The way that people perceive him, the way that people talk about him, the way that people appreciate his work. As product managers, we don't really sometimes get like a stamp, on our products. And so sometimes, somebody, whether it's a customer or somebody down the road taking over from you, whoever it may be, may look at one of your products and think, who made that? How is that? Who was involved? Things like that. And so, it was something that I had no idea about coming into product management. I had no idea what my personal brand was or a brand, in general. And so that's what I'm here to talk to you today about. And I'm going to tell you a short story that pretty much leads up to kind of my rise and my downfall before finding out what exactly it meant to have your personal brand as a product manager. So this was about, how long ago was it? This was about 5 years ago. And so I've been working with my company for around 8 years. And I started out using, being a customer and essentially using an internal product that helps data, migrate data. And so done this for years. And finally I got my chance, to step into product management. And so I was actually in charge of immediately of the internal application that I had been using for years, right? So I'd also been using outside vendor applications, to do the kind of same thing. So I thought I was pretty experienced. And so I walked into that opportunity, number one, hopeful, right? Because I knew what I was going to be doing. I was going to make this product the best thing since sliced bread. I thought to myself, I know exactly what it takes. I thought I was experienced. I thought, with all the other vendor applications that I've used, I can see the pros and cons. I can see how I can make my product better, and I can see, what exactly needs to be changed in my own. I thought I was right. I thought I had all the answers. I thought that I was being promoted into this position as a technical product manager, thinking, I'm going to drive this. I've got the wheel. I know what to do, and I'm going to, enhance this product, right? Development was behind me. I had been, friends with these guys for years. I've been working with them for years. And so I told them what I wanted. They were behind me all the way. We decided together, what exactly we were going to change. I listened to their ideas, right? So I had them behind me. I felt like there was nothing stopping me. And I knew my department. Before I had stepped in the product, I was a global practice lead. And so I was really kind of in charge of the overall process that my department and all the teams across the globe used, this internal application. I'd also, before I stepped in the product, done, I had redesigned the workflow that we used in our CRM system to keep track of these data migration products, which was kind of my first introduction to doing, product management. So I thought I knew my department, and I was going to end up being a hero. I was going to be the one that was going to turn this thing around, that all the bugs and all the problems that we'd been facing over the years, we were going to get rid of those, and it was going to be a fine-tuned machine, and everybody was going to love me for it. Well, that's not what happened, because what I realized over time was I walked in there very opinionated. I thought what I wanted was right. I was totally inexperienced in product management. I had no idea about Agile or Kanban or scoring systems or product requirements or even writing user stories. So I walked into that thing not really knowing what to do. I had a knowledge of our ticket system. Like we use Jira, but I had no idea, how to formulate these requirements or anything like that. I had no clue. I had no clue about product management. And my line manager at the time, he had also, kind of grown up in product management within the organization. And it's no fault to him, but at the same time, we couldn't tell who was driving ultimately. Develop did what I wanted. So it was essentially like taking hostages where, I would kind of decide what we would want to do, in a small itty bitty committee, mostly in my head. And so development would just do what I would want to do. And we would miss timelines and nobody would hold us accountable. And it just went down, down, down. I didn't listen to my peers, right? So when we talk about stakeholder requirements and we talk about where do we get, the pain points from, the enhancements from, I didn't listen to the folks that I've been working with for years. I thought I knew what they wanted. I thought deep in my mind, I knew what they wanted. And so the outcome I thought was like, everybody's going to love it. And they didn't. And people started to get frustrated. They got so frustrated that, a lot of them didn't really want to listen to me anymore, or really even didn't want to meet with me and speak with me about, any future endeavors. And much like our good friend, the Green Ranger from Power Rangers, he has essentially a downfall being controlled by this woman, Rita. And eventually he's brought him back. And for me, it was kind of a big look at, okay, am I educated enough to continue in product management? If I'm not, what do I need to do? And how am I going to get there? And so, I spent the better part of the next year, and a half kind of learning the game, getting into product management and finding out, what exactly it was. And pretty much just trying to gather, what everybody's pain was when using this product and what I did and did not do, correctly. And so you're probably wondering, like, what does this all have to do with your personal brand? Well, the first thing we're going to get into is emotional weakness, which is a lot of things that people just don't want to talk about. And you don't really hear it a lot in product management, but it does affect us as a whole, because as I've seen actually in a lot of presentations throughout the days, we are human beings and we make mistakes. And there are a lot of things, that we kind of have to keep account of And we have to grow and grow as individuals, especially when we're dealing with product management. I always like to see say that product managers are like mini CEOs, right? It is a high profile job. It really is. And when you start to look at all the different emotional weaknesses, that can be, that each one of us can have, like, you could be, and some of these are double-sided, right? So when you look at things like presenting and you look at multitasking and delegating, those have positive sides. Those can be strengths. When you delegate things, because you don't have, the time to do them, and you delegate them because, that person's going to get them done. But you don't like over delegate, obviously. But it can also be a bad thing. And the same thing with multitasking. You can take too much on and you start to miss deadlines, you start to upset people, and you start to let yourself down, right? And so this is what I really had to look at. I had to look at all of my emotional weaknesses and find out what was hindering me from being the best product manager. What was hindering me from having a successful personal brand? So ultimately, your brand suffers. Your brand suffers as a whole. And so, like I was telling you about before about Van Gogh, your work sells itself. So you have to think about how you're interacting with people in meetings, how you're dealing with your peers, how you're dealing with customers, how you're dealing with writing your requirements and your documentation, whatever it may be, right? There's a lot that goes into it, and I could talk about this subject for hours probably. So here's a little excerpt from an article I wrote a couple months ago that was around personal brand and emotional weakness. And so, some of the main things that I talk about are the fact that you have to accept failure, right? You have to accept failure and that you made mistakes, and you have to move forward. And you have to also avoid justifying that you didn't do anything wrong. And that's a tough one. Sometimes we think, I didn't do anything wrong. It was this, it was that. And you start making excuses for yourself, and you end up down a negative path, and your brand once again suffers for that. And you have to bypass complaining. That's probably one of the number one things that you have to watch out for. When you're in a meeting, you're on a phone call, you're dealing with peers, complaining or, negative comments aren't going to get you anywhere. And so essentially, individuals aren't going to want to speak with you, especially if they're not picking up what you're putting down. Negative consequences, have negative outcomes. We know we have great ideas, right? That's one of my biggest problems sometimes, is that I know I have a great idea, but I have to discipline myself to make it practical, right? And I have to put those to paper, and I have to put those into action so that I can make other people more successful, right? So if my documentation's lacking, then when it comes down to is developers ask more questions, and my squads don't really have much confidence that I know what I'm talking about. So your personal brand isn't just about stamping yourself onto a product and how the people perceive you in the outside world. It's about all the people around you, especially the people that you work with day to day. You can't do it alone. Like I said, I know that I have to constantly ask for help. I constantly have to ask other individuals, whether it's my line manager, maybe a mentor, maybe my other peers in product management, developers. I am responsible right now for 6-7 different development squads, which is dozens of people, and each one of them has a lead and architects. And so I look to these individuals for help. What more do you need? Am I translating my requirements properly? How close do you think we are to pushing out? Things like that. And it builds and builds and builds. And so you can't just do it by yourself, especially if you're a product leader. If you're a product leader, you really rely on the individuals underneath you to be able to, handle certain tasks. I always have been on the mantra that you hire people who are smarter and more successful than you, because those are the people that are really going to make yourself and the people around you more successful. So let me talk to you quickly about a success story. So we just wrapped up in December launching a new product that was kind of like our first big rewrite of a product offering that we currently have. And it was extremely successful, right? It was a great launch. It was something that our customers were involved with through and through. The design process was great because we did a few successful things. We listened to our stakeholders, right? So whether it was sales engineering, our sales department, so we have champions for our specific product areas. So we meet twice a week with the sales engineers to kind of discuss, what they're seeing in the field, what customers and prospects are asking for. And we even keep track of all those to figure out, does it match conversations I'm having with customers, versus things that we're thinking about that we get from our research team and innovation, and so I keep my ear close to the ground when it comes to, talking with these individuals, because they have a lot of information, and they talk to customers more frequently than I do. Right. And speaking with our customers and, the people even internally that use our products, stakeholders are so important, because obviously my opinion, while interesting, is invalid. And so stakeholders are extremely important. Right. And it was what made us more successful in this bout. We reached out, to analysts. Right. So we here, at my company, we're really big on analyst relations. And so we reached out to the analysts to find out, what is trending in the market for this specific product area. What are they seeing as strengths and weaknesses? Where are people changing? Things like that. And so, we were involved heavily with analysts to kind of go over the strengths and weaknesses of our products. And we even matched those against our competition, right? So analyst relations was really big for this one, because we wanted to make sure we were building towards something that meets the current market value. We did our homework, right? We looked at mature products out there. We looked at all the pain points and all the plus sides of our product, over the last few years, because it was a very old product. And so we kind of picked it apart, and we did our homework, and we brought, everybody, through the design process, our customers, our internal folks, obviously our developers, so it ended up being very successful because the product was built by our customers. It was built by our stakeholders, with me just trying to take the pieces and putting them together. And I listen to my squads, right? Some of the best ideas I get and some of the best things that come out of my products are because of, my developers. They have great ideas, things they may have brought from another company, things they may have noticed, are kind of a pain point while developing it. And so I listen to my squads, and specifically this time, because we made a lot of great decisions, based off of certain features that we put first, how we did certain, features specifically. And so it was a great team effort with my designers, architects, and my, and my developers, to kind of push this one through. And we celebrated our milestones. As we, went to different periods of beta, as we launched new features, we celebrated as a team. And that's something that I always stress, because, when you celebrate your milestones, it's a good feeling, right? We want that, that output is so important to us as product managers, right? Whether you're in kind of a leadership role or you're all the way down to an associate, who's getting started with writing requirements for the first time or something. And so it was such a huge win for us. And, because of that, I felt that my personal brand for the first time was really taking the light. I thought that, this was a product that I poured my heart and soul out to. And I've done a lot of other product releases, but this was the first time that I'd done something from scratch, right? Where it was a completely new user interface. It was a completely new, design system that we had taken on board. It was the first product of its kind, in our organization. And so there were a lot of challenges. But in the end, I felt that this was like the first step on something that was a part of me and something I can take forward in any new opportunity I face and look back on that and say, that's my work. That's my Van Gogh. And so there's a couple things, right, when we're thinking about our personal brand that isn't just about product success, right? So I talked about, a story where I kind of hit a low and then a story where I hit a high. But now let's think about, the things out in the field that really make your personal brand. And the first one is network and take new opportunities. Sorry. You got to get out there. Being in this conference is probably the first step to networking with other product managers and other people in the field, whether they're in your same industry or not. I've seen a lot of good presentations where I want to reach out to those individuals and find out, how do they do this? How did they go about that? And I want to take new opportunities. I have started, and I'm trying to get down on my my personal blog. But starting a blog or a podcast, these are things that are like these. Yeah, these are definitely things that you want to take advantage of, because they're going to help your personal brand and help expand, your knowledge base and who you are as an individual. Artifacts are definitely key. So whether it's a product requirement document or user story mapping, any artifacts that you have currently that have kind of made your own. And even my line manager, he gave me something that I thought was pretty archaic, and I kind of made it my own and made that process my own. And so to me, that's a great artifact and something that I'm going to use, moving forward in new opportunities, in product management. Be data driven. The facts speak for themselves. When it comes down to anything that you're building or anything that you're proud of, you've got that data behind it, and you want to make sure you have that data behind it, right? Whether it's a number, part of a number that, your product's tied to, or it's analytics. I've seen a lot of presentations on analytics these past days. We use Pendo at our organization. Data is key. Confidence is tough. And as you were probably looking at that list of emotional weaknesses, a lot of that can hinder your confidence. But think about, in that meeting, when you have to present and you have to present that data, confidence is something that's going to push you. And the more that you start to push out successful products and the more that you start to feel happy about your output, the more confidence you're going to have in new opportunities, the more confident you're going to be to want to present to other people, your work or what your company's, current goals are, things like that. And so confidence is probably the number one. Support each other, support your developers, support your design folks, take a positive approach, a positive and friendly approach to it. Make sure that they understand your personas, make sure that, they understand what you're trying to build, and also support your customers, right? Know their pain points. These are the things that kind of make up your personal brand, right? Beyond just your organization. And be unique, make something your own. Like I said, my boss gave me something and I made it my own, and I'm kind of proud of that. And I think that's pretty unique. And being a unique individual, especially a product manager, is definitely what people are looking for in the field. And stay positive. Always bring a positive note. When it comes to a positive attitude, you don't want to be the one complaining. You want to be the one that's a leader, that essentially is helping carry everybody else, to that point of understanding what you're building, who's it for, right? I've always lived by this, that your products make people's lives easier. They are a huge, huge piece of individuals day to day. And so anything that I try to do, I try to make sure that my products make people's lives easier. And when I hear that praise, and when I hear, people saying, thank you so much for listening to my feature request, or, thank you so much for, just considering this for your roadmap, things like that makes me feel good, because that means that it's providing, something that they've been missing in their workplace, that's going to make their lives easier, reduce cost, and increase productivity. Because you never know. You could be the next, Van Gogh. I thank you guys so much for your time. I think we have a few minutes for questions, so I'm absolutely willing and able to talk about anything around this or something else, tall wooden ships, whatever you are thinking about.
Michael, that was fantastic. Thank you so much. I think, and don't tell the other presenters, but one of my favorite PowerPoints of the week so far. Love the font and the animations. We've got a few questions coming in. We've had a lot of kind of love in the chat as well. I think your presentation has really resonated. Some nice comments from John, Susan. Amro's really keen on your font as well. Raul wants to know, as Group PM, how can I encourage more junior team members to find their own personal brands early on? A couple of my team, I feel, are currently lacking confidence to carve their own path.
Ooh, that's a good one. I haven't seen a Group PM in a long time either. Yeah. So just talking about my own experience, that's a very interesting question. So I would send them on a knowledge path. Like, go out there onto the internet. There are so many great articles and so much out there about, your personal brand and what a lot of people perceive it as. Like, education to me is key. Like, by going out there and just even giving them homework to go out there and read about what your personal brand means in product management. That's something, that they're gonna have to go out and they're gonna have to find themselves, honestly. But build confidence in giving them tasks. For me, I think what was probably the best thing was, my boss, like my line manager, he kind of gave me tasks, based on something that we're going to be starting in the future. And so I was able to go out there and kind of do the homework for myself, right? And kind of think about, what I would want in that product and share it around with like designers and developers. And so by the time that it got, to like roadmap conversations or, when we were going to start, I was pretty confident on, what I was going to be building. And that's when I was an associate product manager. So when I was an associate, for me, that was a really big, confidence booster. And then giving me more speaking opportunities, whether it's, speaking up, taking point in meetings, things like that. Like those help build confidence, right? So you got to give them opportunities to help them grow. I hope that answers the question.
Sounds like some more sage advice. Thank you, Michael. Another one here from Heber. How can I know my strengths and weaknesses and skills in a scientific way?
Well, you may be speaking to the wrong person because I'm, for me, I'm a very emotional person, right? I've had to do a lot of growing, up until this point. And so, I think what would help me, would be talking to the people that are closest to me. Sometimes, when we're missing opportunities or we kind of start to figure out that like people don't want to approach us or are not including us in group conversations, things like that are kind of, maybe I'm, there's something I'm doing wrong. I mean, when you start to have one-on-one conversations with the people that are close to you, especially in product management, you start to realize, kind of what your weaknesses are. And sometimes you have to take, I'm sorry, but a fall to realize, exactly that, you're the problem, and that, you have to kind of take a deeper look into, what exactly, I mean, there were a lot on that list, right? And that's just, not even breaking the ice. There's a lot of faults, that we have as human beings and we make mistakes, but, the best thing you can do is try to recognize those, and try to learn and grow from that. So I hope that kind of answers it, but please reach out to me if you want to speak about it more, because I'm sure there's a lot more context there and a lot more to talk about.
Thanks, Michael. Got another one here from Albert. I have a question about the confidence bit. Do you have any tips or techniques you use when you get asked a difficult question in front of seniors or decision makers and it knocks you back in your confidence? How do you cover in such a situation and keep going? Great question.
Yes, such a great question. And I went through an experience recently where, I had done a profit and loss statement for a new product that we're putting out in a couple months. And so we have a pricing committee, right, which is made up of like our CEO and CFO and all these individuals, right? And so I had decided through my own market research, right, the pricing for this new product. And so I did get asked some very, frank questions on that. And once again, it goes back to data, right? If you have the data and you're prepared enough, right, like there shouldn't be any gaps, right? And I know that's, maybe a bit to chew on, but, when it came down to preparing for this moment, and I lack confidence sometimes too, don't get me wrong, like I've been up there and completely dropped the ball, but, when you have to have those frank conversations with senior leadership, you just have to remember that you're prepared for this, right? You know the numbers and just talk them through it, talk them through how you arrived to this and talk about why you made this decision. And hopefully, there'll be somebody there to back you up. I know that's not always the case, but most of the time, if we're talking about, a specific kind of meeting, you will have backup, hopefully. But if not, just remember that, confidence comes from within. That's based off of preparation. And so preparation really is what's going to help boost your confidence level when you're having, key, executive type conversations. I hope that makes sense.
Good advice. I've got another one here from Galen. How do you pursue new opportunities like podcasts, etc., without spreading yourself too thin?
True. So when it comes to multitasking and I, have that problem a lot of the time. I like to do things like Twitch streaming and I like photography and I like to do all these different things, right? So if I'm going out and I'm, putting myself in another opportunity, like the blog I started a blog called The Product Corner, and I've only produced 2 articles in the last, 4 or 5 months. And so that's perfect example of spreading myself too thin because I'd always wanted to get back to it. But it's about looking. I met an individual not too long ago who does 5 things before 10 o'clock every day, right? And then doesn't eat food after 7 p.m. And that really kind of made me look at how I balance my day out, because when I'm at work, I like to think that I balance myself out pretty well, right? But I had to kind of take a look at that. And so dedication to a new opportunity does take discipline, right? And so that's something you got to commit to. You know, there's a guy out there, he did a motivational talk. I think he's like an ex-Navy SEAL or something. I mean, he wakes up at like 4:30, 4:45 every morning, no matter what. And of course that takes discipline. But I think if you want to explore a new opportunity like a podcast or a blog, you kind of have to make that time for yourself, right? Which I know is, you know, kind of just speaking generally, but you have to make that time for yourself, and you have to, you know, discipline yourself to put the time in for it. And you got to make sure, you know, leading into it that you are going to make the time for it, especially if you have a family. I've got a 8-month-old Dachshund underneath me who takes up a lot of my time day to day, even when I'm trying to work. I hope that makes sense and that helps. Oh, Heather, I think you're on mute.
Classic. I'm always on mute. So yeah, I think that's it for questions. That takes us pretty much perfectly to time, but some really nice comments in the chat as well. I think what you were talking about has really resonated with people and validated how a lot of people feel. And I think there was a comment from John saying he came to this presentation with preconceived notions of what personal brand might be, but this has kind of changed his concept of that. So yeah, I think you kind of touched quite a few people's opinions. Thank you everyone for joining and your great questions, but a huge thank you to Michael for sharing your wisdom with us. It's been great to have you. Do connect with Michael on LinkedIn. I've pinned your link to the top. So thank you so much.
Thanks everybody.
Thanks, take care.